Welcome programming with Python. So far, we have learned the basic concept of Python programming, and today we are going to talk about functions. Right? What is a function? Okay. You have written many codes so far. Function is a reusable block of code which perform a particular operation. All right. There are many built-in functions in Python. So we will start talking about with the built-in function, which you have familiar so far. And then we will move on to the user-defined functions and how to document these functions in a proper way. Right? Let's start with some of the built-in functions. You have len, like print, len, range, right? So different built-in function. Okay. And let's talk about the range function. Right, you have used the range function. We have learned that range of 5 give you the number from 0 to 4. Right, so why do we use a range? Okay, let's say now I want to create a list. So let's say I want to create a new list called name list containing the values from 0 to 9. All right, so what we can do is, of course, we can write it down 0, 1, 2, 3, or we can call the range function. All right, so now I want to have the 0 to 9, right? 9 plus 1 is 10. So I will call a function range of 10. Then you know the type casting, all right? So we can convert it to list immediately. So it's much more efficient, especially when you have more numbers, right? So let's say I want to create a number 0 to 100, 0 to 200, or with a jumpy or tree with the alternative values, and so on. Instead of writing out everything, we can just call a basic function range to come up with a new list, right? Not only that, you can use the random number generators, right? And a lot of other basic functions to make your code more efficient. Now let's talk about the numerate. All right, we have learned numerate in looping last time. All right, so here you see that numerate will give you the two values, okay, tuple values, right? Index and original values. Right. So we can use that numerate, and then we can even create recap this one, right? Type casting. We can do that casting into a list. So instead of writing the tuple and list with a lot of syntax error, we can just call the different method, different function. List, numerate, or marks, it will give you the list. All right. Or we can also use, instead of typecasting, we can also use this to asterisk stars to expand your values. All right. So bracket star, numerate, or marks will give you the same values like typecasting. All right. Okay. Now let's move on to the mapping. All right, so this one is very useful. Let's say now I have the list of names, especially in language processing. Right, so I have a lot of names in my list. Later, when you start working with the real data, right? When you have the Excel data, you have a lot of names inside the list. What we want to do is we want to convert that all everything into the buckets, right? So we have learned that str append method can convert all the characters into a buckets, right? So here, what we are going to do is we are going to use a method called map. Okay, so we call the map, and then what we do is we will do the string.append method. We use a string.append method, and then we apply this string.append method into each element of the names. All right. So here, you please take note that string.append, you don't need the round bracket anymore. Okay. So this is how you can make use of the built-in function easily to make your code more efficient. All right. Now, this is just a few examples that I gave you that what you have learned so far. All right. There are so many other functions that you have learned so far. Same ideas. You can apply it. Now, we may want to do special operation. All right. Specific calculation, or we want to do something more than built-in function. This is where we write the user-defined function, right? So, like the name mentioned, user-defined function is the function that you define yourself, okay? But please avoid repeating the code. If already the code is already there, no need to rewrite, all right? Then, please be careful that your function perform only one and one action. It is very important. Sometimes the user started to write the function, and then we like to do a lot of things inside one function, which is not very good. All right. So make sure that your function perform only one action. This way, it is easy to understand for anyone reading your code. right? So it is easy to find the error in test your code as well. Okay, now let's start writing the user-defined function. All right. So this time, what we want to achieve is we want to extract the name and domain from a given email. Okay, let's say email is given as rinchan@gmail.com. I want to extract name and domain separately. All right. So we know that if a string is given, what we can do is we can just use a split method to split the name. All right. Here we want to split the email by using the asterisk. So what we are going to do is we will use the split method to split into a list of words, right? Then the first index give you the name, and then second index give you the domain. Okay, so we will print it out the name and domain for you. All right. So now I change the email. Then you have to rewrite these two lines again to print it out, right? So whenever you have a new email, you are going to copy and paste in your code, which is very messy. Your code is not efficient, not easy to understand. So this is where we are going to our user-defined function come in. All right. So instead of repeating the code copy and paste, we are going to write it as a function. And in Python, the function keyword is definition, DEF, right? You start writing with DEF followed by your function name. Okay, remember our naming convention rules, all right? Your name must be meaningful. Here, I want you to use all the name to be in the lowercase, all right? So here, I give a name, function name to be split name domain. Okay, I'm going to split name and domain. Input is given by the email, all right? So definition, function name, and then your input arguments followed by the full order. Okay, the rest of the code is stay the same like what you have done earlier. You will split them into a list of words, and then you extract the first one, index for name, second index for your domain. Right? So advantage here is instead of writing these two lines all the time, repeating multiple times, you just call this function with a different email address. So this makes your code more efficient and easy to understand. All right, okay. Now let's talk about argument. All right. So just now in our function, at least we need one input argument, which is email. All right. If the user call our function without inputting the argument, you will get the type error because expect something, all right, but you don't give any information, so it gives you an error. So what we can do, we can give the default argument. All right. Inside the argument list, what we are going to do is email, and then I assign this my name at domain.com to email my user equals sign. In this case, once a user call without providing any information, default argument values will be used to split name and domain. All right. So of course, default argument is not compulsory, but by giving the default argument, it makes your code more efficient and prevent from crashing. All right. Now, let's do a bit of exercise. Here, I'm going to write a function called loan calculator that takes two float number, right? Loan amount and interest rate. Okay. Then we are going to calculate the total interest and return the total interest values. All right. So simple mathematics, total interest is loan amount times interest rate by hundreds. So this is a total interest that you have to give to the users. All right. Okay. Now the problem coming. Let's see. Here, my first argument is a loan amount. Second argument is a interest rate. All right. So I cannot reshuffle them when I give an information. All right. So whenever I call this function, my first argument will be considered as a loan amount. Second argument as a interest rate. But what we can do is using the keyword as argument. All right. So later you will see when you start to work on the Python pandas and visualization, we always like to use the keyword argument because sometimes if you have multiple arguments, you don't remember what is the sequence. Right. So what we can do is here interest rate equal to 6, loan amount equal to 1,000. That means we are telling you that even though I give 6 as a first argument, what I want to use is I want to use it as an interest rate. All right. Okay, good. So now we learn the default argument and keyword argument. Now let's move on to the local and global variables. What do we mean by local and global variables? All right. So Imagine at your house, your family, all right, your name is a unique, all right, your name is a unique, okay? But outside of your house or someone you don't know may not know your name, right? May not know your name unless you know that each other you have introduced. Otherwise, these names belong to you only. Okay, this is called local variable. All right. So in the first example, threshold 40 is a local variable. It only belongs to elective subject grade. All right. So if I want to use this threshold value in the next function, I have to redefine the local variable here, threshold equal to 40. Second threshold belong to call subject grade, even though we call the same variable. All right. So that's where we call the local variable. Okay. Now let's look at our example. What we want to achieve. What we want to achieve is we want to see whether the student passed the exam for both elective subject and core subject. Passing score is 40 for both subject. All right. So we don't need to redefine the threshold two times. But the challenge here is that for the elective subject, the score is given based on the out of 20. All right. The core subject, the score is based on out of 100. So we cannot use the same function. All right. So we are going to write two functions: elective subject grade, calculating the elective subject grade, and calculating the core subject grade. All right. So here I need to define the local variable threshold for elective subject grade, and I need to define the threshold for core subject grade. For instead of doing that, what we can do is we can define threshold as a global variable. All right. So here I define the threshold as a global variable in the elective subject grade. So in this case, I don't need to redefine core subject grade. It will just automatically know the threshold because threshold is a global variable. It is accessible for both functions. But I don't encourage you to use a lot of global variables, all right? Because sometimes it can be very confusing and then it loses the privacy of your own variable, all right? Okay, now you have learned the basic ideas how to write the functions and then how to use the four key arguments as well as the keyword argument as well as the default argument. All right. Now let's move on to the documentation. How do we document? Okay, documentation is very important. What do we mean by documentation? When you write the code, when you write the function, you need to give the information. You need to write down the information about your function, your variables. All right. Otherwise, it is very confusing for you yourself and for other people as well. Okay. Let's talk about documentation. All right. Now, in your core cell, if you write health or print, this is the information you will get. All right. So by looking at this print function, you understand, oh, okay, so print help you to print out the values, all right? And then these are the key arguments that you need, okay? So this is the information it has provided by the help print. Of course, they have to write this help file, all right, when you are defining a function, okay? So in your case, when you do write the user-defined function, this doc string is very important. Okay, there are different styles of writing for doc strings. Here, Google styles, right? NumPy document style, etc. Okay, so but basically, wherever the style is, there are key three informations are being held under this document string, right? So the first information you should give is what does the function do? What is their purpose? All right. Second, what are the parameters you need to run this function? What are the arguments? What are the inputs that you need? That return values. What kind of outputs you are going to return? What kind of values you want to return? All right. So these are the key three information. Of course, you can add another one, which is an exception. How to handle the exception, which will be covered in the next lesson. All right. Or special notes to the client users. Where we are going to use your code, you want to give additional information. Right. So but the main thing is these three information you should provide in your document string. How do we write the document string? Let's look at our function split name domain. All right. So document string is written under the code. Okay. Three code. You see that the red code, right? So you can see that when you write the code, the color is changing to the red color. All right. So the first line gives you the function purpose. Split name domain, split the input into name and domain. So it's a description, right? You describe what does a function do. Second is the arguments. My argument is email. Inside the bracket, I say it is a string type, right? So it's an input email to submit. What am I going to return? I'm not going to return anything because I will just print it out. I'm not going to return the variables or values. All right? Okay. Now let's look at another example with return value for elective subject grade. Okay. So elective subject grade here, elective subject grade description is return the grade of the subject for the given mark. Right. So here I take the arguments mark. Data type is a float data type. It should give you a float number, right? Or 20 float number. Okay. Then grade return value will be the boolean. All right. Grade pass is true. If it's a fails, I will return as a false. So this is the information I provide. So for the next user, when they want to use your function, they can just type health elective subject grade, and then they can see all the information. Right? This is called document string. In addition to document string, of course, in your code, you can even put the command line as well, right, to provide additional information. Later, we are going to do some practice in your GitHub Pro. Please remember to go to the link and then do the exercise as per the instruction given. Thank you.